Warning: this story will challenge everything you think you know about love, family, and what it means to truly see someone. Before we dive into the heart-wrenching secrets of a millionaire's mansion, smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you sacrifice for the truth? The nanny's unthinkable dare. Sir, your son isn't autistic. He just needs love. Carmen Fuentes, her voice firm yet gentle, held the gaze of Mateo Herrera. The man, a titan of industry whose name echoed through Madrid's highest echelons, visibly recoiled. His eyes, usually as cold as the polished marble floors of his vast estate, blazed with a fury that made the expensive timepiece on his wrist seem to tick every second of the suffocating silence. "How dare you?" Mateo finally hissed, his voice dangerously low. "You have 36 specialists contradicting that opinion. You're fired. Gather your things and leave my home this instant." Carmen felt the air leave her lungs. She desperately needed this job. Her grandmother and younger sister, Daniela, back in the sun-drenched, dusty streets of Oaxaca, depended on her. But she couldn't stand by and watch little Lucas be treated like a broken machine. Across the opulent room, the therapist who had provoked the 4-year-old's latest meltdown watched with a smug, satisfied smirk as Lucas continued to sob in a corner. Carmen knelt, her hands trembling as she began to gather the scattered toys. She had just lost her livelihood for speaking her mind, and with it the lifeline to her family. Yet, deep inside, a defiance bloomed. "As you wish, Señor Herrera," Carmen replied with quiet dignity, rising to face him. Then something unthinkable happened. Lucas, who, according to countless reports, hadn't uttered a coherent sentence in months, pushed himself off the floor. He stumbled towards his father, clinging to his immaculate trousers. "Papa, don't let Carmen go." The words, clear and perfect, echoed through the stunned silence. The therapist dropped her tablet with a clatter. Mateo stared at his son as if seeing him for the very first time. Carmen, tears welling in her eyes, knew she had just witnessed a miracle. A house of labels and silence. Just 2 weeks prior, Carmen had arrived at the imposing Herrera mansion in the exclusive Lomas Altos district of Mexico City, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Her worn shoes seemed out of place on the immaculate marble, and her simple dress felt swallowed by the overwhelming luxury. Dona Pilar, the stern housekeeper, had greeted her with an appraising stare that made Carmen feel tiny. "Señor Herrera requires a highly qualified nanny," she'd stated, scanning Carmen's modest resume. "His son needs special attention. I have experience with children with special needs, and I hold a degree in early childhood education," Carmen replied, trying to project confidence. "Humph," Dona Pilar had grumbled, clearly unimpressed. "Little Lucas is 4 years old. He was diagnosed with autism last year. His mother passed during childbirth, and Señor Herrera is very particular about his care." As they waited for Mateo, Carmen peered through a grand window. A small boy sat alone in the sprawling garden, meticulously lining up toy cars. A woman in a white coat sat nearby, taking notes without interacting. "Is that Lucas?" Carmen had asked. "Yes, he's in therapy. He mustn't be interrupted." Something in the child's profound solitude twisted Carmen's heart. She recognized the same lost look she'd worn after losing her own parents. The door burst open, and Mateo Herrera strode in, tall, handsome, radiating authority. Yet, his eyes held a hollow emptiness Carmen instantly recognized. The gaze of someone who had ceased to feel. "Señor Herrera, this is Carmen Fuentes, the nanny candidate," Dona Pilar announced. Mateo barely spared her a glance. "Does she have experience with autistic children?" "Yes, I worked at a center. Can you start today?" "The previous nanny left without notice, and I have an important meeting." Carmen blinked, startled by his abruptness. "Yes, of course." "Good. Dona Pilar will explain the rules. The main one: follow the therapist's instructions precisely. Do not alter Lucas's routines. And please, do not disturb me while I'm working." With that, he was gone. Carmen looked at Dona Pilar, who simply sighed. You'll get used to it. The señor has been like this since Dona Sofia died. Come. I'll show you your room and Lucas's schedule. That very afternoon, Carmen officially met Lucas. He didn't meet her gaze, nor did he respond when she introduced herself. He simply continued arranging his cars by color. In her room, Carmen found a thick file detailing Lucas's medical history, strict routines, and medications. She was stunned by the sheer volume of diagnoses and treatments for such a young child. In the following days, she watched the specialists treat Lucas like a case study. No one hugged him. No one truly played with him. No one sang him songs. One night, exploring the silent mansion, Carmen found a portrait of Sofia Herrera. She was a beautiful woman with kind eyes, the kind of eyes Lucas had inherited but which no one seemed to notice beneath the layers of medical labels. Slowly, when they were alone, Carmen began to introduce small changes. She sang him Oaxacan lullabies as she bathed him. She told him stories during meals. She hugged him when he seemed distressed instead of applying the recommended containment techniques. And Lucas responded with small smiles, with fleeting glances, with fewer tantrums. Until that fateful therapy session changed everything. The therapist pushed Lucas to complete an exercise, ignoring his clear signs of distress. When the boy finally burst into tears, the specialist looked at Carmen. Go get Señor Herrera. We need to demonstrate these disruptive behaviors. And that's when Carmen, seeing the child's desperation, couldn't hold back. Just as Mateo entered the door, she uttered those words that changed everything. Sir, your son isn't autistic. He just needs love. Now, with Lucas clinging to his father's legs, pleading for Carmen to stay, the fate of all three hung on the decision of a man who had forgotten how to feel. A glimmer of hope. Mateo stared at his son as if he were hearing him speak for the first time. For a moment, the powerful businessman seemed vulnerable, almost scared. Lucas, still clinging, murmured. Mateo awkwardly knelt to his son's level. What did you say? I want Carmen to stay, the boy repeated, wiping tears with his shirt sleeve. She makes the monsters go away. The therapist quickly interjected. Señor Herrera, this is just an emotional reaction. Miss Fuentes has been altering established routines. And, silence, Mateo commanded, not taking his eyes off his son. Lucas hasn't spoken a complete sentence in. His voice cracked slightly. How long? According to the reports I reviewed, over a year, sir, Carmen responded softly. Mateo slowly rose, smoothing his impeccable suit. His face had regained its usual composure, but something in his gaze had shifted. You can stay for now, he finally said, turning to Carmen. But you will follow all medical instructions to the letter, and I want cameras in Lucas's room. I'll be monitoring every move. As you wish, Carmen replied, suppressing a small sigh of relief. And you? Mateo turned to the therapist. I want a complete report on what happened today, first thing tomorrow morning. Without another word, he left the room. Carmen let out the breath she'd been holding and knelt beside Lucas. Thank you for defending me, champ, she whispered. You are very brave. Lucas didn't respond, but for the first time, he looked directly into her eyes before returning to his cars. That night, as she tucked Lucas into bed, Carmen noticed the small red light of a newly installed security camera. Far from intimidated, she discreetly waved at the lens and continued to tuck in the child as if nothing had changed. You know, Lucas, my abuelita says stars are windows where those who love us look down from afar, she murmured, closing the curtains. Your mommy surely has the biggest window in heaven to watch over you. From his study, Mateo watched the monitor, a frown creasing his brow, perplexed by the naturalness with which this woman treated his son. No medications, no complicated protocols, just love? The word felt strange to him, almost forgotten. Over the next few days, Carmen walked a tightrope. She followed medical instructions when under surveillance, but introduced small changes when she could. A new game, a song, an unexpected hug. One afternoon, while tidying Lucas's closet, she found a box of untouched musical toys. Among them was a small flute. When she pulled it out, the child showed immediate interest. "Do you like music, Lucas?" she asked, surprised. The boy nodded slightly. Carmen offered him the flute, and to her astonishment, Lucas began to blow, producing untrained but enthusiastic notes. "How well you play," she encouraged him. "I used to play too when I was little. My abuelito had a guitar." Lucas's eyes lit up at the mention of the instrument. Carmen made a mental note. The next day, after her shift, she rushed to her small apartment and dusted off her grandfather's old guitar. It wasn't much, but it still sounded good. She brought it hidden the next day. When she showed it to Lucas after his snack, the boy seemed hypnotized. His tiny fingers reverently touched the strings. "Do you want me to teach you a song?" Carmen offered. For the first time, Lucas nodded enthusiastically. What they didn't know was that Donna Elena, Mateo's mother, was watching them from the half-open door with a severe expression. The elegant 60-year-old woman had returned from her trip to Europe and did not approve of the nanny's new methods. "What is the meaning of this?" she interrupted, entering the room. "Instruments are not part of Lucas's therapeutic program." Carmen quickly stood. "Donna Elena, good afternoon. We were just—" "I know my grandson's treatments perfectly well," the woman cut in. "Who authorized this?" "I did," a voice from the hallway responded. Mateo appeared in the doorway. He had been observing the scene for several minutes through the cameras. "Son, this woman is disrupting all his progress." "Progress?" Mateo interrupted with unusual calm. "Do you call a year of silence progress? Carmen has my authorization to try alternative approaches." Donna Elena stared at him, scandalized, while Carmen suppressed her surprise. It was the first time Mateo had defended her. "As you wish," the woman finally replied. "But I'll be watching. The Herreras are not guinea pigs for experiments by unqualified people." When Donna Elena left, the atmosphere remained charged with tension. Mateo looked at the guitar, then at his son, who held it protectively. "Do you play the guitar?" he asked Carmen with genuine curiosity. "A little. My grandfather taught me," she replied, surprised by his interest. "Lucas seems to have a natural inclination for music." Mateo nodded thoughtfully. "Continue then," breaking the silence one note at a time. That night, a fierce storm battered the city. Lightning illuminated the sky, and thunder rumbled through the walls. Carmen was finishing reading some books when she heard a terrified scream from Lucas's room. She rushed to his side and found him trembling under the covers. "Hey, calm down," she soothed, sitting beside him. "It's just water falling hard." Lucas clung to her tightly. Carmen began to hum softly, rocking him as she would a much younger child. Slowly, the boy's sobs diminished. "How about we make hot chocolate? It helps me when I'm scared," she suggested. To her surprise, Lucas took her hand and followed her to the kitchen. While Carmen prepared the chocolate, the child watched fascinated as she mixed the ingredients. They didn't notice Mateo's presence until he cleared his throat from the doorway. He wore a dressing gown over his pajamas and looked uncomfortable, as if he'd forgotten how to behave in his own kitchen at midnight. "Lucas had a nightmare," Carmen explained. "We're making hot chocolate. Would you like to join us?" Mateo hesitated. It had been years since he'd shared such moments with his son. "Just for a moment," he finally replied, awkwardly sitting on one of the stools. Carmen served 3 cups and added a touch of cinnamon to the chocolate. "In Oaxaca, we say chocolate cures the soul," she commented naturally. "Isn't it delicious, Lucas?" The boy nodded, leaving a funny chocolate mustache on his lip. Mateo looked at him and, for the first time in a long time, genuinely smiled. It was a brief but powerful moment. The 3 of them sat in the kitchen at midnight, drinking chocolate while the storm raged outside. A small, impromptu family. The following week, after much insistence from Carmen, Mateo agreed to seek a second opinion on Lucas's condition. The new specialist spent hours evaluating the child and reviewing his history. "Señor Herrera," he finally concluded, "your son does not present a typical case of autism. What I see is selective mutism and attachment issues, likely stemming from early trauma and, he paused significantly, a lack of consistent emotional connection. Are you saying that I'm saying your son needs fewer medications and more meaningful human interaction. Miss Fuentes seems to have instinctively found the right approach. Carmen, present at the meeting at the specialist's request, held her breath as Mateo absorbed the news. His son wasn't autistic. He had been treating a wrong diagnosis for years. On the way home in the luxurious chauffeured car, a tense silence reigned. Finally, Mateo spoke. You were right, he admitted in a barely audible voice. About Lucas. About everything. Carmen simply nodded, understanding the enormous effort those words had cost a man like him. He's a wonderful child, Senor Herrera. He just needs to be truly seen. And for the first time, Mateo truly looked at his son, sitting between them, drawing quietly, and wondered how much time he had lost, locked away in his own pain. A new melody for the Herrera home. Change came gradually like spring after a long winter. The Herrera mansion, once cold and silent, began to fill with small noises. Children's laughter, guitar music, even occasional arguments about who had hidden Lucas's favorite dinosaur. One Sunday morning, Carmen entered the kitchen and found Mateo attempting to make pancakes. Flour was everywhere, and Lucas, sitting on the counter, clapped enthusiastically as his father struggled with the spatula. Need some help? Carmen asked, suppressing a laugh. Mateo looked at her with a mixture of frustration and amusement. Please, this is more complicated than closing a deal with the Chinese. Here, let me show you. Carmen washed her hands and stepped beside him. The secret is in the wrist. She positioned herself, guiding his hand to perfectly flip the pancake. They were so close she could smell his expensive cologne, and for a moment, their gazes met. Mateo cleared his throat, suddenly conscious of their proximity. That's how it's done, Carmen murmured, quickly stepping away. Mine! Lucas exclaimed, reaching his little hands towards the plate. It was the first family meal they shared, sitting on the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room. Carmen taught them to use agave syrup instead of artificial syrup, a custom from her homeland that Lucas enthusiastically adopted. What happened to the therapists? Carmen asked a few days later, noticing their visits had decreased significantly. I reduced their hours, Mateo replied, reviewing documents in his study. The new specialist suggested focusing on play therapy and music. Besides, he paused, searching for the right words. I've noticed Lucas progresses more with you than with them. Carmen felt a wave of pride. It was the first time Mateo had openly acknowledged the value of her work. I could teach you some techniques, she offered. For when you're with him. Mateo looked up from his papers, surprised. Do you think I could? Of course. You're his father. No one better than you. Something shifted in Mateo's expression, as if he finally understood the weight and blessing of those words. You're his father. Days turned into weeks. Mateo began arriving home earlier from work. He canceled business trips. He even installed a small swing in the garden for Lucas. One afternoon, Carmen found them both under a tree, Mateo reading aloud while Lucas listened intently, leaning against his chest. The image was so beautiful that she discreetly pulled out her phone and took a photo. It would be her little treasure. The new dynamic did not go unnoticed by Dona Elena, who observed with growing concern how the simple Oaxacan nanny was integrating herself into the Herrera family's life. Don't you think Lucas is becoming too attached to Miss Fuentes? She commented one afternoon while having tea with her son. You should consider maintaining a certain professional distance. Mother, for the first time in years, my son is happy, Mateo replied firmly. I'm not going to change that. Dona Elena narrowed her eyes. Are you sure it's just for Lucas? Mateo didn't answer, but the slight blush on his cheeks said more than any words. The unbreakable bond. Lucas's birthday was approaching. He would be 5 and Carmen was determined to make it a special celebration, unlike the previous ones which, according to Dona Pilar, had consisted of small, formal gatherings with expensive gifts but little joy. A piñata? Mateo asked, bewildered, when Carmen presented her ideas. Lucas has never had a party like that. Exactly why he needs one, she insisted. He needs to be a child to play with other children. I've noticed he watches the little ones in the park when we pass by. Mateo conceded, still unsure. Carmen took care of everything. She invited neighborhood children, prepared traditional games, and convinced the cook to make pastel de tres leches instead of the usual French cake. In the days leading up to the party, Carmen and Mateo worked together on the preparations. She taught him how to make papal picado decorations, and he surprised her by secretly learning children's songs to sing to Lucas. On the morning of his birthday, Lucas awoke to a serenade. Mateo, Carmen, Dona Pilar, and even some staff gathered in front of his bed, singing Las Mananitas. The boy looked at them all with wide eyes and then, to everyone's astonishment, burst into pure, joyful laughter. The party was a resounding success. The garden, decorated with colorful balloons and streamers, filled with children's laughter. Lucas, initially shy with his guests, soon joined the games, guided by Carmen. The most surprising sight was Mateo actively participating, holding the piñata, helping serve cake, even playing hide-and-seek when he thought no one was watching. As dusk fell and the guests departed, soft music played. Lucas, exhausted but happy, played with his new gifts in a corner. "Shall we dance?" Mateo suddenly proposed, extending his hand to Carmen. She hesitated.
Señor Herrera.
"Mateo," he corrected her. "I think after saving my son from the medical system and teaching me how to make piñatas, you can call me by my name." Carmen smiled and accepted his hand. They began to move slowly to the rhythm of an old ballad. It was the first time they had been so physically close, and both seemed equally nervous and delighted. "Thank you," he murmured near her ear, "for bringing life back to this house." Carmen felt her heart race. She looked up and met Mateo's eyes, warmer than ever. For an instant, it seemed he was going to kiss her. What a lovely scene! Dona Elena's icy voice cut through the moment like a knife. "I didn't realize children's parties included romantic dances between employer and employee." They separated abruptly. Mateo's jaw tightened. "Mother, please. I'm just stating the obvious, dear," she replied with false sweetness. "By the way, I need to speak with you. In private." A battle of worlds. Later that night, Carmen stepped out into the garden seeking some peace. The moon illuminated the trees, and the swing swayed gently in the breeze. "May I join you?" Mateo's voice startled her. "Of course," she replied, moving aside on the stone bench. They sat in silence for a few minutes, contemplating the stars. "I don't know how to say this," he finally began. "It's been so long since I felt anything for anyone that I'd almost forgotten what it's like." Carmen held her breath. "Mateo, let me finish, please," he pleaded. "Ever since Sophia died, I locked myself away in my work and my grief. I built these walls around myself and around Lucas. I thought it was for the best that we wouldn't suffer anymore. But you came, and..." His eyes shone intensely in the moonlight. "You showed me I was wrong, that living without feeling isn't truly living." Carmen's heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. "I'm afraid of what I'm starting to feel for you," Mateo confessed. Carmen gathered her courage and replied, "I'm afraid too. It can't work. We come from different worlds. I work for you and..." "Is that what worries you?" he interrupted. "Social differences. It's part of reality, Mateo," she replied with sadness. "Your mother constantly reminds me, and she's right. What would people in your circle say if they knew you were interested in the Oaxacan nanny?" Mateo was about to respond when Dona Elena's voice echoed from the house.
Mateo.
"Carmen, come immediately." They found the elegant woman in the study, holding some papers with a triumphant expression. "I finally discovered who your beloved nanny truly is," she announced. "Did you know she abandoned a child in Oaxaca years ago? I have proof." Carmen's face paled. Mateo looked at her, confused. "What is she talking about?" With tears in her eyes, Carmen explained. She's referring to my sister, Daniela. When our parents died, I was 19 and she was 8. I found work in the city to support her, but I left her with my grandmother in Oaxaca. Every peso I earn is for them. And why would there be a report of abandonment? Dona Elena pressed. Carmen lowered her gaze. 2 years ago, I had an accident. Car hit me and I was hospitalized for 3 months. I couldn't send money, nor communicate. Social services investigated our situation because Daniela missed school to work and help my grandmother. But I never abandoned her. I never would. A tense silence fell. Mateo looked at the papers his mother held, then at Carmen, and finally made a decision. I believe you, he said simply, and tore the documents into pieces. Mother, this has to stop. Carmen is not only an excellent nanny. She's the reason Lucas and I are rediscovering what it means to be a family. And if I have feelings for her, it's my business, not yours. Dona Elena stared at them, stunned. She had never seen her son confront her like this. Carmen, tears streaming down her cheeks, watched the man who had finally found his voice, not only to defend his son, but also her. That night, under the jacaranda tree in the garden, they shared their first kiss. A shy, almost youthful kiss, laden with promises and fears. A kiss witnessed only by the moon and by Lucas, who watched smiling from his window. A bridge between worlds. Are you sure you want to do this? Carmen asked for the third time, as Mateo's luxurious SUV drove down the dusty road towards Teotitlan del Valle. Completely sure, he replied with a nervous smile, adjusting his sunglasses. Lucas hasn't stopped talking about meeting your grandmother and seeing the mountains. In the back seat, Lucas watched the Oaxacan landscape in wonder. The imposing mountains, the cornfields, the simple houses with their flower-filled patios. It was a world completely different from the elegant streets of Lomas Altas. 2 months had passed since that first kiss under the jacaranda. Their relationship had progressed slowly, with knowing glances and late-night conversations after Lucas was asleep. Mateo was determined to do things right this time. Carmen's invitation to visit Oaxaca during the Guelaguetza festival had been spontaneous. To his surprise, Mateo immediately accepted. Lucas needs to know more about Mexico than just shopping malls and trendy restaurants, he had said. The car stopped in front of a simple but well-maintained house, with sky-blue walls and pots overflowing with bougainvillea. Carmen got out first, breathing deeply the familiar air. Carmencita. Dona Esperanza's warm voice broke the silence as an elderly woman hurried out, arms open.
Abuelita.
Carmen ran to hug her. Mateo helped Lucas out of the car, nervously observing the emotional reunion. He felt strangely out of place, without his usual suit and meticulously scheduled meetings. And these must be the famous Mateo and Lucas. Dona Esperanza smiled, wiping away a tear. Carmen talks about you both incessantly in her calls. It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am, Mateo formally responded, extending his hand. The old woman ignored the formal gesture and enveloped him in a strong hug. No ma'am here, mijito. I'm Esperanza, or Abuelita if you prefer. Lucas, usually shy with strangers, approached curiously. Dona Esperanza knelt to his level. I have something for you, she said, taking out a small carved wooden figure. An alabrige to protect you. The child's eyes sparkled as he took the colorful mythical animal in his hands. Thank you, he exclaimed, surprising everyone with his enthusiasm. The house was modest. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen dining room, and a backyard full of medicinal plants and fruit trees. Mateo, accustomed to spacious, luxurious homes, tried to hide his discomfort. I prepared Carmen's room for you, Dona Esperanza explained. I put an extra cot for Lucas. And you, Mateo? Well, the sofa is quite comfortable. Carmen suppressed a smile at Mateo's momentary look of panic. Clearly, sleeping on a sofa was not part of his plans. It's perfect, Abuelita. Thank you. That afternoon, while Carmen and her grandmother prepared tlayudas in the kitchen, Mateo and Lucas explored the small garden. Lucas had discovered a family of lizards and watched them, fascinated. Is he adapting well? Dona Esperanza asked as she ground chili on the metate. Better than I expected, Carmen replied, looking out the window. Though he still hasn't tried your salsa. Both chuckled. I wasn't referring to Lucas, the old woman clarified with a knowing look. Carmen smiled, blushing slightly. Mateo is complicated. He has a good heart, but years of pain hardened him. He's learning to feel again. And you? Are you sure about this path? Her grandmother asked seriously. Men like him come from a different world with different rules. Sometimes I think I'm crazy, Carmen confessed, that I'm asking for trouble. But then I see how he looks at Lucas, how he looks at me, and love is never easy, Majida, Dona Esperanza interrupted. But sometimes the most difficult paths are the ones worth taking. The first night was revealing. During dinner, eating under the stars in the patio, Mateo listened intently to Dona Esperanza's stories about the region. Lucas had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's excitement. And your family? The old woman asked Mateo. Carmen mentioned your mother, but little else. Mateo took a sip of mezcal before answering. My father died 10 years ago. He was a demanding man. My mother lives in our family house, though she has an apartment in the mansion. She's not as warm as you. Dona Esperanza nodded understandingly. Does she know you're here? I told her I was taking Lucas on vacation, he replied with a half-smile. I didn't specify where or with whom. Secrets have short legs, Majito, the old woman warned. Sooner or later, you'll have to decide if Carmen is someone you want to hide or show off. That night, as Carmen slept beside Lucas, Mateo contemplated the ceiling from the uncomfortably small sofa. Dona Esperanza's words echoed in his mind. Was he truly prepared to face the consequences of loving someone like Carmen? Not for her sake, but for the world around them. The following days were a total immersion in Oaxacan life. They visited the local market, where Mateo was impressed by Carmen's bargaining skills. They walked through the ruins of Monte Alban, where Lucas ran freely for the first time, without worrying about getting dirty. The night of the Guelaguetza was magical. Amidst traditional dances, music, and vibrant colors, Mateo watched Carmen explain the meaning of each dance to Lucas. Dressed in a hand-embroidered traditional huipil, she had never seemed so beautiful to him. Dance with me? She asked, extending her hand. I don't know how to dance this, he protested, visibly uncomfortable. No one knows until they try. And so, under the Oaxacan stars, the powerful businessman learned to follow the rhythm of the sun Ismeno, awkward but enthusiastic, surrounded by people who didn't know his last name or his bank account, building a future piece by piece. Back in Mexico City, something had changed. Lucas talked non-stop about the Alabrijes, the mountains, and Abuelita Esperanza. Mateo seemed more relaxed, less concerned with absolute control over every situation. And Carmen began to imagine a future where separate worlds could become one. A week after their return, Mateo surprised her with an unexpected proposal. There's a charity gala on Friday. I'd like you to accompany me. Carmen dropped the book she was reading. As your nanny or as? As my companion, he clarified. My partner. Carmen's heart skipped a beat. It was a huge step, a public declaration. Mateo, I don't have anything appropriate for an event like that, and I've already thought about that, he interrupted with a smile. Do you trust me? The next day, a stylist and a dressmaker arrived at the mansion with several dresses for a fitting. Carmen felt like she was dreaming as she tried on creations by famous designers. This one, she finally decided, choosing an elegant emerald green dress. But, the dressmaker asked, could you add a detail? Carmen took a small piece of embroidered fabric she had brought from Oaxaca from her drawer. I'd like you to incorporate this work from my region. On the night of the gala, when Carmen descended the main staircase, Mateo looked at her as if seeing an apparition. The dress fit her curves perfectly, and the Oaxacan embroidery detail on the neckline gave it a unique and personal touch. I have no words, he murmured. Lucas, dressed in a small suit, applauded excitedly. Carmen looks like a princess. Donna Elena, passing through the foyer, stopped dead. Her expression fluctuated between surprise and distaste. Are you taking the nanny to the Herrera Foundation gala? She asked coldly. I am taking Carmen, yes, Mateo replied firmly. And not as an employee, mother, but as my personal guest. The gala was dazzling. Lights, champagne, glittering jewels, and measured conversations. Carmen had never felt so scrutinized. Her every move seemed to be evaluated by dozens of curious eyes. The Montero family, Mateo introduced an elegant couple. Old friends of my parents, Fernando, Isabel, this is Carmen Fuentes. Charmed, the man replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And what do you do, Miss Fuentes? Before Carmen could answer, a woman interrupted. She's little Lucas's nanny. Isn't that right? My daughter interviewed for that position some time ago. An awkward silence fell. Carmen felt her cheeks burn. Carmen is a specialized early childhood educator, Mateo intervened. And thanks to her, my son has progressed enormously. But the damage was done. Throughout the night, Carmen heard whispers as she passed. He's with her out of pity. She's surely trying to secure her future. Poor Mateo, so vulnerable after Sofia. In the restroom, while touching up her makeup, she overheard two women talking, unaware she was in one of the stalls. Did you see the Oaxacan nanny? How shrewd. First, she won over the child, and now she's going for the entire fortune. They say she's not even a good nanny. That she told Mateo the autism diagnosis was false, just to gain his trust. Carmen emerged from the stall, head held high. The women abruptly fell silent. The lobby has better acoustics for gossip, she commented with dignity before leaving. But the words stung. Returning to Mateo, she found him animatedly conversing with a beautiful blonde woman. Carmen, he exclaimed upon seeing her. I want to introduce you to Elena Ruiz, director of the educational foundation we support. A pleasure, Elena responded with a genuine smile. Mateo was telling me about your therapeutic approach with Lucas. I'd love for you to visit our center someday. For the first time that night, Carmen felt like someone saw her for her merits and not as an intruder. The evening worsened when, returning home, they found Sofia's parents waiting for them. Donna Elena, with a triumphant smile, had surprisingly invited them to stay for a few days. We wanted to see our dear grandson, explained Señor de la Fuente, a distinguished man with the same aristocratic air as Donna Elena. Dinner was torture. Lucas's grandparents treated Carmen as part of the staff, only addressing her to ask her to serve more water or to inquire if Lucas had taken his vitamins. Carmen is not part of the staff, Mateo clarified, irritated when his mother-in-law asked her to bring more bread. She is my guest, just like you. Oh, excuse me, the woman replied with false innocence. It's just that, since she takes care of Lucas, I assumed. That night, Carmen and Mateo had their first serious argument. I can't go on like this, Mateo, she confessed in the garden, away from prying ears. Your world will never accept me. I'll always be the employee who took advantage of you. And my opinion doesn't count? He replied, hurt. What Lucas and I feel doesn't matter? Of course it matters, but... Sounds like you're looking for excuses to run away. He interrupted her. Is that it? Are you afraid to truly try? I'm afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake, she exclaimed, tears in her eyes. That you'll regret choosing someone who doesn't belong in your circle? Maybe I don't want to belong in that circle either, he replied, his voice breaking. They parted that night without resolving anything. Carmen cried herself to sleep, thinking about the offer she had received days earlier, a position as a teacher in a community school in Oaxaca. Perhaps it was a sign, the heart's decision. The next morning, while organizing Lucas's clothes, she noticed something strange. His small travel suitcase was not where it usually was. Searching the closet, she found the boy hidden in a corner, hugging the suitcase tightly. What are you doing here, little one? She asked, concerned. I don't want you to leave, Lucas sobbed. I hid your suitcase so you can't pack. Carmen's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She sat on the floor beside him and hugged him tightly. Lucas, please don't leave, the child pleaded. Dad is sad when you're not here. I'm sad. I don't want the silence to return. At that moment, Mateo appeared in the closet doorway. The pain in his eyes upon seeing the scene was palpable. The three looked at each other in silence, aware that they had reached a breaking point. Move forward together despite everything, or separate forever. For 3 days, a strange calm settled over the Herrera mansion. Carmen and Mateo maintained a tense cordiality in front of Lucas, but barely exchanged words when alone. Donna Elena observed the situation with calculated patience, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One morning, while Carmen was helping Lucas with his reading exercises, Mateo entered the children's room with a determined expression. Lucas, can you go with Donna Pilar for a moment? I need to talk to Carmen about something important. The boy looked at them alternately, worried. Are you going to fight again? No, champ, Mateo replied, kneeling to his height. We're going to fix things. I promise you. When Lucas left, Mateo closed the door and sat in front of Carmen. I'm going on a trip, he announced without preamble. Carmen's heart sank. Was this the end? When are you coming back? She asked, trying to maintain her composure. In 2 days. It's something I need to do for us. There was a determination in his eyes that Carmen hadn't seen before. She didn't ask further. Take care of Lucas, he asked before leaving. And please, don't make any decisions until I return. Mateo's mysterious trip left Carmen with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. At night, as she tucked Lucas into bed, the boy asked the same question. Is Dad going to bring a surprise gift? I don't know, sweetheart, she replied honestly, but I'm sure he's thinking of us. On the second night, while reading a book in the garden, Carmen received a call that would change everything. Her sister Daniela had won a full scholarship to study medicine at the National University. It's all paid for, Carmen, the young woman exclaimed, excited. Accommodation, books, everything. I can be a doctor. The news brought tears of joy to Carmen. For years she had worked hard so Daniela could study, sending every extra peso she earned. Now, her sister would have opportunities she had only dreamed of. It also meant Carmen no longer needed the money so urgently. For the first time in her adult life, she could make decisions based on her heart, not on financial need. That same night, Carmen found Donna Elena waiting for her in the hallway. May I speak with you for a moment? The elegant woman asked, surprisingly cordial. Carmen followed her to the study. To her astonishment, Donna Elena offered her a glass of wine. I know we haven't had the best relationship, the older woman began, but I want you to know that I recognize what you've done for my grandson. Carmen took a small sip, distrustful. Donna Elena had never been kind to her without a hidden motive. Lucas has flourished under your care, she continued, and it's obvious that my son has deep feelings for you. But, Carmen anticipated. But we both know that this relationship will face enormous obstacles, Donna Elena completed. Not only because of the social class difference, but because of everything it entails. Have you really thought about the future, about what it would mean for you to become Mrs. Herrera? The expectations, the social commitments, the responsibilities. Carmen remained silent, considering the words. My son is impulsive when it comes to his emotions, Donna Elena continued. He always has been. But you seem like a sensible woman to me. That's why I want to make you a proposal. From her desk, she took out an envelope. A job offer at one of the best private schools in the country, with a salary 3 times higher than what you have here and possibilities for professional growth. Far from Mexico City, of course. Carmen looked at the envelope without touching it. Are you bribing me to stay away from your son? I'm offering you a dignified way out, Donna Elena corrected. An opportunity for both of you to remember the good and not end up hating each other when reality hits. Carmen slowly stood. Thank you for the wine, Donna Elena, and for your concern. But my relationship with Mateo and Lucas is not for sale. She left the study with her head held high, though she was trembling inside. What if Dona Elena was right? What if she was being selfish to think it could work? Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Mateo Herrera crossed the threshold of the Casa Azul in Teotitlan del Valle. Dona Esperanza received him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Mateo, young man, did something happen? I need your advice, Dona Esperanza, he replied with uncharacteristic humility. And perhaps, your blessing. The old woman smiled, as if she had been expecting this visit. Come in, son. Chocolate always helps you think better. For hours, sitting in the simple kitchen, Mateo opened his heart to Carmen's grandmother. He spoke of his fears, of social pressures, of his mother, of the memories of Sofia that still haunted him. When I met Carmen, he confessed, I thought she would just be another employee. I never imagined she would teach me to be a father, to be human again. Dona Esperanza prepared traditional chocolate while listening intently. True love is never easy, Mijito, she finally replied, stirring the drink with a wooden malinillo. When I met my Heriberto, he was the son of the hacienda owner, and I was a simple weaver. Everyone said it was impossible. And what did you do? Mateo asked, fascinated. He gave up his inheritance, she simply replied. I learned to read and write so as not to embarrass him. We built a bridge between our worlds, stone by stone, day by day. It wasn't easy, but we created our own path. The words resonated deeply with Mateo. I'm afraid Carmen will leave me, he confessed. That she'll think it's not worth fighting all this. Dona Esperanza smiled wisely. My granddaughter is stronger than you think, but she needs to know that she won't be alone in the battle, that you are willing to build that bridge with her, not just wait for her to cross into your world. That night, sleeping on the same uncomfortable sofa where he had spent those family vacations, Mateo made the most important decision of his life. A new chapter begins. Back in Mexico City, Carmen faced her own crossroads. She had officially received the offer to work at the community school in Oaxaca. The director had called her personally, excited at the possibility of having her on his team. Lucas had begun working with a new child psychologist, one Carmen had recommended. In his first session, the boy had drawn 3 figures holding hands. My family, he had written with shaky letters. Carmen looked at the drawing with a divided heart. The school in Oaxaca represented a professional dream, applying her method with children who truly needed it, being close to her family, living without the constant pressure of proving her worth. But it meant abandoning the new family she had found. The tension in the mansion became unbearable when Mateo didn't return within the promised time frame. On the 3rd day, Carmen received a short message. Trust me, I need one more day. It was Dona Elena who finally broke the silence during dinner. Mateo called. She announced as Dona Pilar served soup. Apparently, he's finalizing some important matters and wants us all to meet tomorrow in the study, including Sofia's parents. Carmen felt a chill. Why would Mateo want to gather the whole family? Did he say anything else? She asked, trying to keep calm. Only that it was momentous. Dona Elena replied with an inscrutable expression. That night, Carmen couldn't sleep. 1,000 scenarios raced through her mind, each more terrifying than the last. What if Mateo had decided to send her away for Lucas's sake? What if his mysterious absence was to prepare a dignified departure, as the Herreras suggested? As the sun began to rise, she made a decision. She packed essentials into a small suitcase and wrote 2 letters. One for Lucas, explaining that she would always love him, and another for Mateo, revealing her feelings and the job offer in Oaxaca. It wasn't a definitive goodbye, but a step back to allow everyone to think clearly, away from social and family pressure. She left the letters on her perfectly made bed and called a taxi. With a broken heart but a clear conscience, Carmen left the Herrera mansion at dawn. What she didn't expect was to find Mateo at the entrance, getting out of his car just as she was leaving with her suitcase. They looked at each other in surprise. He tired but determined. She, with eyes red from suppressed tears. Were you leaving? He said. It wasn't a question. I needed space to think, she replied. I left some letters explaining. I don't want letters, Matteo interrupted. I want you and Lucas building something together. Matteo, your mother, your social circle, Sophia's parents, they all believe this is a mistake. And maybe they're right. To her surprise, Matteo smiled. 3 days ago, I was convinced my world was unchangeable, he confessed. That you had to adapt or it wouldn't work. I went to Oaxaca looking for answers. You went to see my grandmother? Carmen interrupted, stunned. And I found much more than advice, he confirmed. I found courage. Your grandmother told me her story with your grandfather and made me see that sometimes you have to demolish old bridges to build new ones. Carmen dropped her suitcase, confused. What do you mean? Come with me, he asked, extending his hand. There's something I need to show you. The foundation of love. The meeting in the study was exactly as Dona Elena had announced. Everyone was present. She, Sophia's parents, Dona Pilar, and even Lucas, sitting solemnly beside Carmen. Matteo, standing in front of everyone, seemed nervous but determined. I've gathered you because I have important announcements to make, he began. First, I've sold the mansion. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Dona Elena turned pale. You've done what? She finally articulated. The mansion will be empty in a month, Matteo continued calmly. I've bought land halfway between Mexico City and Oaxaca. We're going to build a new house there. One that isn't burdened by painful memories or crushing expectations. This is absurd, exclaimed Sophia's father. Where will Lucas live? Have you thought about him? Lucas will live in a home full of love and acceptance, Matteo replied. With his father and, he looked at Carmen. If she accepts, with Carmen as a permanent part of our family. Carmen held her breath as Matteo approached her. The second announcement, he continued, taking Carmen's hands in his, is that I've created a foundation. It will be dedicated to implementing alternative methods for children with emotional challenges, using the approach Carmen developed with Lucas. I want you to direct it, if that is what you wish. Tears streamed freely down Carmen's cheeks. Are you sure about this? She whispered. It's your entire life. My entire life is right here, he replied, looking into her eyes. With Lucas and with you. The rest are just things. Directions. Appearances. Dona Elena, recovered from the initial shock, stood up. Matteo, this is madness. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. The Herrera mansion has been in our family for generations. Your father. My father lived according to the expectations of others and died without truly knowing his son. Matteo interrupted firmly but without resentment. I will not make the same mistake. Lucas deserves to grow up in a home where love matters more than appearances, and I deserve the opportunity to be happy, even if that means disappointing you. For the first time in her life, Dona Elena was speechless. Sophia's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. If you'll excuse us, Matteo concluded, taking Carmen's hand and Lucas's, we need to talk as a family. In the garden, under the jacaranda that had witnessed their first kiss, Matteo, Carmen, and Lucas sat in a circle. Are we going to live somewhere else? Lucas asked, surprisingly calm about the idea. Yes, champ, Matteo replied. In a place with lots of space to play, near mountains like the ones we saw in Oaxaca. Would you like that? The child nodded enthusiastically, but then looked at Carmen with concern. Are you coming too? Carmen looked at Matteo, who awaited her answer with evident nervousness. That depends, she replied with a small smile. Your dad hasn't officially asked me yet. Matteo let out a nervous chuckle. Then, with complete naturalness, he knelt before her. Carmen Fuentes, would you do Lucas and me the extraordinary honor of becoming part of our family? Not just as a nanny or girlfriend, but as a partner, a wife, a mother, as whatever you want to be. And a grandma, Lucas innocently added, making them both laugh through tears. Yes, Carmen simply replied. Yes to everything, as the three embraced, forming a perfect circle under the purple jacaranda flowers. Carmen knew they had found their own path. It wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles and difficult moments, but they would build that bridge between two worlds together, day by day, with patience and love. And it had all begun with those words she dared to utter months ago. "Sir, your son isn't autistic, he just needs love." Update. Carmen stared at the door of her small apartment, unable to believe what she saw. She had returned defeated after visiting the Herrera mansion, finding it practically empty, with furniture covered by sheets and staff packing the last belongings. Convinced that Mateo had left without saying goodbye, she had arrived at her old home only to find the two people she loved most in the world waiting for her with wildflowers and her grandfather's old, now restored, guitar. How did you get here?" she stammered as Lucas ran to hug her. "We asked Dona Pilar for your address," Mateo explained with a nervous smile. "We've been waiting for hours. We almost gave up." Carmen opened the door with trembling hands, aware of how humble her space was compared to the opulence they were used to. A worn sofa, a small table, walls decorated with family photographs and Oaxacan textiles. It was all she had. "It's not much, but—" she began to apologize. "It's perfect," Mateo interrupted, looking at the photographs with genuine interest. "It's your home." Lucas immediately ran towards a colorful woven rug that covered part of the floor. "Like Abuelita Esperanza's house," he exclaimed enthusiastically. Carmen invited them to sit while she prepared lemonade in her tiny kitchen. She felt strangely vulnerable, as if this version of her, the Carmen from before the Herreras, was now exposed to them. "I'm sorry for leaving like that," she finally said, sitting across from Mateo. "When I saw the empty mansion, I thought that." "You thought I had left without you," he completed. "I'm sorry. I should have explained the moving plans earlier, but I wanted it to be a surprise." Mateo took a set of architectural plans from his pocket. "The land I bought is in Atlixco, Puebla," he explained, spreading the documents on the small table, 2 hours from the city and 3 from Oaxaca. It has a view of the volcanoes and a small river runs through the property. Carmen's eyes widened in amazement as she examined the plans. "It's beautiful, but, Mateo, this is huge. We don't need so much space." Mateo smiled, visibly excited. "It's not just a house," he explained. "Half of the property will be the first center of the Herrera Fuentes Foundation, a place where children like Lucas can receive alternative therapies based on your method." Carmen felt tears well up in her eyes. "Are you serious? A foundation with my name?" "With our names," he corrected. "We'll be partners in everything, Carmen. The house, the foundation, raising Lucas, life." As they spoke, Lucas had discovered a small altar with photographs of Carmen's parents, adorned with paper flowers and small mementos. "Who are they?" he asked innocently. Carmen approached and knelt beside him. "They are my parents," she explained softly. "They are in heaven like your mom." Lucas looked at the photographs with curiosity. "Do they watch over you from the stars, like my mom watches over me?" "Exactly," Carmen replied, touched by the child's sensitivity. Mateo joined them in front of the altar, putting an arm around Carmen. "We'll have a special place for them in our new home," he promised. "And for Sofia too. All 3 will be part of our family." The doorbell interrupted the emotional moment. Carmen opened the door and found her grandmother Esperanza and her sister Daniela, accompanied by a driver carrying their suitcases. "Surprise!" Daniela exclaimed, hugging her sister tightly. "Your millionaire boyfriend sent a super luxurious van for us. Everyone in the village came out to see." Carmen looked at Mateo, who smiled shyly. "I thought you'd want to share this moment with your family," he explained. "Dona Esperanza already knew the plans. She helped me organize everything." "You knew?" Carmen asked her grandmother, who was entering the small apartment with dignity. "Of course I knew," the old woman replied with a mischievous smile. "Why do you think I let him sleep on my sofa for 2 nights? We had to make sure his intentions were serious." Everyone laughed as the small apartment filled with life and conversation. Lucas and Daniela connected immediately, while Dona Esperanza inspected the plans with a critical eye. "The kitchen needs to be bigger," she declared. And you need a traditional oven in the patio to make tlayudas. To Carmen's surprise, Mateo diligently took notes of every suggestion. The doorbell rang again. This time Carmen opened the door to find Dona Elena, elegantly dressed but visibly uncomfortable in the humble setting. A tense silence filled the room. Mateo stood up, placing himself protectively beside Carmen. Mother, I didn't expect to see you here. Dona Elena took a deep breath before speaking. I haven't come to cause problems, Mateo, she clarified. I just want to talk. With both of you. The tension was palpable as Dona Elena entered the apartment. Her gaze swept over the modest space, not with the disdain Carmen expected, but with curious attention. Dona Esperanza rose to greet her. So you are the famous Dona Elena, she said naturally. The coffee is hot if you'd like a cup. To everyone's astonishment, the two older women observed each other with cautious respect, like two generals evaluating their respective troops. It would be a pleasure, Dona Elena replied, following Carmen's grandmother towards the kitchen. While the grandmothers conversed in low tones, Mateo and Carmen exchanged incredulous glances. What's happening? Carmen whispered. I have no idea, Mateo replied. But she's being civilized, so let's take it as a good sign. Finally, Dona Elena returned to the living room with a cup of coffee in hand. Mateo, Carmen, I've been reflecting since our last conversation, she began. It hasn't been easy. I had a very clear vision of how things should be. She paused, searching for the exact words. When we lost Sofia, I also lost a part of my son, she continued. You withdrew, Mateo. You distanced yourself from everyone, even Lucas, and I allowed that to happen because I didn't know how to help you. Carmen noticed how the elegant woman struggled to maintain her composure. Then Carmen arrived, Dona Elena continued, and suddenly, my grandson spoke, laughed. My son came home early from work. The mansion that had been dead for years came alive again. She looked directly at Carmen. I resisted because I was afraid that this change would mean losing the little I had left of Sofia, of our old life. Dona Elena, Carmen began, but the woman raised a hand to stop her. Let me finish, please. What I want to say is, thank you. Thank you for giving me back my family, even though I've been so difficult. From her purse, she took out an elegant envelope and handed it to Mateo. These are the original plans of the country house your father built before he died, she explained. We never used it because he passed away before finishing it. It's in the mountains of Puebla, not far from the land you've bought. Perhaps you can incorporate some of it into your new home. Mateo, visibly emotional, hugged his mother for the first time in years. Carmen watched the scene with tears in her eyes, aware that she was witnessing a small miracle. I also have something for you, said Dona Elena, turning to Carmen. If you'll allow me. She handed her a small velvet box. Opening it, Carmen found a delicate silver butterfly brooch. It was my grandmother's, Dona Elena explained. It has passed from mother to daughter for generations. I would like you to have it as a symbol that I accept you into our family. The gesture, as unexpected as it was significant, left Carmen speechless. She could only nod as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Dona Esperanza, who had observed the entire scene in silence, approached and placed a hand on Dona Elena's shoulder. Bridges are built from both sides, she said wisely. Today you've taken the first step. A new legacy, a new home. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The design of the new house progressed, incorporating elements from both cultures. Spacious modern areas that Mateo appreciated, combined with interior patios and communal areas in the Oaxacan style that Carmen adored. News of their engagement leaked to the press, causing a stir in social circles. Millionaire Herrera marries his son's nanny, sensational headlines proclaimed, but for every malicious comment, 10 stories of support emerged from people who saw their relationship as a genuine love story. One afternoon, while reviewing construction progress, Carmen received an unexpected call. It was Mariana Solis, one of Lucas's former therapists. Carmen, I've been following your story in the news, the woman began, and I want to apologize. You were right about Lucas, about his diagnosis, about what he really needed. Thank you, Mariana, Carmen replied, surprised by the call. It means a lot to me. Actually, I'm calling about something else, the therapist continued. I'd love to learn your method. I've seen the change in Lucas. It's extraordinary. That conversation was the seed of something bigger. Soon, other professionals began to contact them, interested in the approach that had transformed Lucas Herrera's life. The foundation, which initially seemed a distant dream, began to take concrete shape even before having physical facilities. The first training session took place, ironically, in the patio of Dona Esperanza's house in Oaxaca. A dozen therapists, psychologists, and educators sat in a circle under the ancient guava tree, while Carmen explained her philosophy. Children don't need more labels, they need more connection. Mateo proudly watched from a corner, with Lucas asleep in his lap, after playing all afternoon with the village children. One Sunday morning, barely a month before the wedding, Mateo, Carmen, and Lucas visited the land where their new home was being built. The main structure was already up, and the workers had left the site empty so the family could explore it in private. This will be your room, Mateo explained to Lucas, pointing to a spacious area with windows overlooking the garden. You can paint it any color you want. Blue like the sky, the child decided immediately, running to explore the rest of the house. Carmen and Mateo were left alone in what would be the main living area. Through the large windows, they could see the volcanoes in the distance, majestic under the afternoon sun. Are you happy? Mateo asked, hugging her from behind. Carmen turned to look him in the eyes. More than I ever imagined possible, she replied sincerely. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover it was all a dream. It's not a dream, he assured, kissing her softly. It's our future. They sat on the unfinished concrete floor, drawing their dreams with a stick for every corner of the house. Here a library, there a music studio for Lucas, further on a workshop where Carmen could teach Oaxacan weaving techniques to local women. And here, Mateo said, pointing to a space next to the backyard. Perhaps someday a room for a little brother or sister for Lucas. Carmen smiled, snuggling against his chest as they watched Lucas run freely through what would be their new home, chasing butterflies and laughing with abandon. A whole world opened before them, built on those brave words Carmen had spoken months ago, words that had transformed not only the life of a lonely child, but also that of a man who had forgotten how to love, and that of a woman who had found her true purpose. As the sun began to set behind the volcanoes, painting the sky orange and purple, the three sat on the unfinished porch. Lucas, with his great-grandfather's restored guitar, clumsily tried to play the notes Carmen had taught him. Mateo hummed the melody, his deep voice blending with Carmen's laughter, when Lucas missed a note. And there, in that simple yet perfect moment, Carmen knew with certainty that they had found their true home, not in the walls they were building, but in the hearts they had learned to open again. A year had passed since that afternoon on the empty land. Spring covered the gardens of the new house with multicolored flowers, and guests began to arrive for the ceremony. Under an arch of blooming jacarandas, white chairs formed a natural aisle leading to a simple altar decorated with ribbons and wildflowers. The house, now finished, was a harmonious blend of worlds, contemporary lines that respected the natural environment, local materials combined with modern technology, spacious, light-filled areas that invited both private reflection and family togetherness. In one of the rooms, Carmen gazed at her reflection in the mirror while her sister Daniela, radiant in her peach-colored dress, adjusted the veil over her hair, which was styled with natural flowers. "You're beautiful," Daniela exclaimed, now a confident university student. Mom and Dad would be so proud. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of cultural fusion, a modern and elegant design, but with Oaxacan embroidery details made by the expert hands of Dona Esperanza and other artisans from the village. In another room, Mateo nervously adjusted his white guayabera, while Lucas, impeccable in his small suit, carefully practiced his role as ring bearer. Do you think Carmen will like the surprise? The now 6-year-old Lucas, full of confidence, asked. She'll love it, Mateo assured, affectionately ruffling his son's hair. You've practiced a lot. Outside, the garden had been transformed. Guests from two seemingly opposing worlds chatted animatedly. Executives in Guayaberas shared mezcal with Oaxacan artisans. Sociologists discussed ancestral weaving techniques with grandmothers. Children ran among the tables, oblivious to the social differences their parents had once considered insurmountable. In a corner of the garden, Dona Elena and Dona Esperanza, transformed into improbable allies, oversaw the final details of the ceremony. The elegant Herrera matriarch had abandoned her tailored suits for a more relaxed dress, while the Oaxacan grandmother wore a huipil specially made for the occasion. Who would have imagined this a year ago? Dona Elena commented, watching her two worlds harmoniously intertwine. Love always finds its way, Dona Esperanza wisely replied. Sometimes it needs a little push, but it always finds it. The music began to play, a mix of classical strings with traditional Oaxacan instruments. Guests took their seats as Mateo waited nervously under the jacaranda arch, accompanied by his best man. Lucas appeared first, walking solemnly with the cushion holding the rings. Halfway down the aisle, to the surprise of the guests, he stopped, pulled a small flute from his pocket, and played a simple yet perfectly executed melody. It was the song Carmen had taught him during those first weeks together, when no one believed the silent child could communicate. There wasn't a dry eye when Carmen appeared at the end of the aisle, arm in arm with the uncle who had taken her father's place. Her face glowed with serene happiness as she walked towards Mateo, who looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The ceremony was brief but emotional. They exchanged vows written by themselves, sincere promises to build a path together that honored both worlds. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Lucas was the first to applaud, jumping with joy as the guests joined the celebration. The party extended into the evening. There were traditional Oaxacan dances alongside contemporary music. The food combined gourmet dishes with traditional recipes prepared by Dona Esperanza. The children of the community, many of them beneficiaries of the newly inaugurated Herrera Fuentes Foundation, presented a small play directed by Carmen. As night fell, Mateo and Carmen managed to escape the celebration for a few minutes. They walked hand in hand to their favorite spot in the garden, under the same jacaranda tree that Mateo had insisted on transplanting from the old mansion. I have a gift for you, Mateo said, handing her an envelope. Carmen opened it curiously. Inside, she found official documents. The foundation center in Oaxaca was complete and ready to be inaugurated. It will be called the Esperanza and Sofia Children's Development Center, Mateo explained emotionally. In honor of the two women who guided us here. Carmen hugged him tightly, too emotional to speak. It's perfect, she finally managed to say. Everything is perfect. They kissed under the stars, aware of the long journey they had traveled since the day Carmen dared to speak the truth. Your son isn't autistic, he just needs love. Back at the party, they found Lucas in the center of a circle of children, guitar in hand, teaching them the song his mother Sofia used to sing to him, as his father had told him. A melody that had been lost during years of silence and misguided diagnoses, but which now, like love itself, had been rediscovered. As they watched their son sharing music and laughter, Carmen and Mateo exchanged a look of deep understanding. They didn't need words to express what they both knew. They had built not just a house or a foundation, but a true home. A space where love healed wounds, broke down barriers, and built bridges between worlds that only seemed distant because no one had dared to unite them before.